So I'm recording. It started.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Hasin, for joining this interview. And it's more like an informal discussion. And I see the value of this because we don't have much of oral kind of documentation or history about evolution of urban sanitation journey. Just to give you a background of this work, this work is actually initiated by EVAG, Susanna, and they are collecting, they're compiling a more or less like a monograph, a short 80-page, 90-page monograph on how urban sanitation has evolved in terms of two things. One is approaches and the other tools. So while urban sanitation as an evolution of infrastructure has a long history, they are only looking at how different approaches have evolved. And these different approaches are like right to water or sustainable sanitation, um, and and the tools which they have listed down are like the city sanitation plans, the city-wide inclusive sanitation, street flow diagrams, and all that. So they had started this work by compiling these approaches and tools internationally. But then when they did a review of their monograph, people told them that you need to also build in what has happened on the ground. So then they asked me to contribute about 4 or 5 pages on the on this aspect on the ground, how it has translated. So while I am not going to do just you know just a transposition of approaches and tools, but I just wanted to give you this context. So what I shared with you in my note was trying to understand the institutional evolution of urban water, especially urban sanitation, from the in the last few decades, and then trying to understand has what they have compiled actually tries to show that initially there was a focus on low cost urban sanitation in the 70s, 60s, 70s, and then it became centralized sewerage systems which were applied to all cities, big projects. And then they were saying in the last 2 decades or so, there is a little focus on decentralized, sustainable, circular economy, citywide inclusive sanitation, gender, and other aspects. So I just wanted to check. So if you see the history of urban sanitation in India, it's, and I think it's quite common in South Asia. So here also, centralized sewerage in India was initiated by the British pre-independence, and it used to be in the what there were three typologies of cities in India. There was an old city, and then there was a new city, like Old Delhi, New Delhi, and Cantonment Board. So the new part of the city sometimes was called model town, especially in the Indian context and Pakistan context. And the cantonment board and the new part of the city, the new part of the city would have, say, the court, the government offices, the district magistrate, and all that. So that area was normally sewered, and the cantonment boards were also with a planned system. But after 47, 50, as the urbanization grew, our cities expanded like an amoeba on all sides. And then the peri-urban areas which were expanding, either they were developed by some authority which was set up, like in India, Delhi Development Authority, and each state kind of set up these authorities which used to take up land and create colonies, or it grew through informal settlements and then they were later regularized. So this was the trajectory of urbanization, and therefore it had an impact on the water and sanitation services as well. And there was a central part of the city which had sewerage systems, and then there was this peri-urban which used to be connected after a few years, and the connection wasn't good, and leakages were there because it wasn't a planned expansion in any way. For example, in Delhi, as the city grew from Yamuna or outwards, the sewage treatment plants kept shifting out. And the slope of Delhi is like this because Yamuna is like this and the city is like that. So as you move away from the Yamuna towards outside, Actually, you have to go deeper into ensure a gravity flow of sewerage systems. So that impacted a lot on the poor quality of sewerage systems we have, because in some places they are 100 feet, 200 feet deep to be able to reach a treatment plant. So if you could start by just sharing with me what has been the evolution in Bangladesh of urban sanitation systems and the institutional setup. In the institutional setup, both the governance and the legal, or the constitutional side, please.
Okay, thank you. In fact, in Bangladesh, we are very proud of, sanitation movement and achieving open defecation free status and so on. But most of the movement and sanitation were kind of centered around rural. In case of urban, we have little achievement, or progress was not kind of documented, or it kind of always came as a spillover effect. We never kind of considered urban sanitation as core of our development. So as you mentioned in your opening speech that it came from British era, that Victorian sewerage system. So it always in our mind that there will be a big, large sewerage system in a city, and that is the only solution for a city. And we kind of tried to have that as our ultimate goal and aim. And we never thought of alternative solutions or multiple solutions in a city. So what happened, if we look at the country and our institutional arrangement, Dhaka city and few other cities, I am not mentioning the number because this number changed over time. Right now it is 9 city corporations which have WASAs, water and utility, water authority, water and sewerage authority. In short, WASAs, Dhaka Wasa, Chittagong Wasa, Rajshahi Wasa, something like that. So these utility authorities are mandated to provide water and sewerage system services within the core city. So that is the mandate of these organizations. And rest of the organizations belong to Department of Public Health Engineering, that is DPHE. So DPHE actually deal with rest of the country, and the municipality also, they kind of share the responsibility with DPHE, and I will come back to that later.
DPHE?
DPHE, Department of Public Health Engineering, DPHE. So now coming back to the city authority, that city utility authority, WASA. When you talk about WASA, in the name there are two parts. One is water, another is sewerage. But if you look at the real scenario, nobody has any sewerage system except Dhaka city. So Dhaka city has its sewerage system, which covers only 20% of the city, roughly 20% of the city. And again, relate to your country that this is the old Dhaka, and I mean and this system was built long before, during British era or something like that. And this is not covering the entire city. So rest of the 80% of Dhaka city is still under coverage of on-site sanitation. And when you look at other city WASAs, they are still operating the water system. There is no sewerage system, but when you talk about the title, it contains the sewerage system. So ideally, the city corporations of all these cities are basically handling the on-site sewerage system, on-site sanitation system. So that is the institutional arrangement so far. And now what is happening, that Dhaka city is having a sewerage master plan, and there are 5 different decentralized sewerage plants are supposed to be constructed, and those are at different stages of construction, and they are expected to be finished by within a span of 10 years or so, and if not, at least 1 or 2 will be in operation in coming few years. We are expecting something like that, if not all. So all are not possible. So this is the scenario of Dhaka city. And apart from Dhaka city, there are some other big investments are coming in few other city corporations. So they are again trying to construct some sewerage systems. But that is the main system they are planning to construct. So this is the scenario of big city corporations. Okay, now I'm moving to the secondary towns, municipality, that is the urban center. So ideally, the urban centers, there are no sewerage system. People are still using the septic tank on-site sanitation system, what we are talking about always, so on-site system. And basically, municipal authority is responsible for managing those systems. And in rural areas, it is the responsibility of Department of Public Health Engineering. So this is the current institutional arrangement and so on. And if you talk about the on-site sanitation and the evolution, then I can say you that when we started sanitation movement back in 2003, and when our government, the then government, was very much aligned with achieving MDG target of having open defecation free country, so there was a big thrust on sanitation movement, and everybody was after kind of installing toilets and so on. Then we had a kind of major interest to improve of slums through providing sanitary toilets there, mostly single pit or twin pit toilets in slum areas, so that the situation gets improved, be that in urban city corporations or in municipalities. So in a nutshell, slum dwellers get kind of involved, and slums got kind of attention. So it is sometimes around 2003. And if I look at the statistics in 1990, the open defecation was, if I recall it correctly, 10% around urban areas. I am not pretty sure, but it is like that, 10% was. So at that time, there was a thirst to reduce the open defecation, and that's why slum kind of came into attention. Now coming to the next point, that when we are kind of putting our thrust for toilet construction because reaching to open defecation free status, we realize that this is not the end of the problem. We are encountering this next generation problem, that the toilets in slums are overflowing. So what to do? At that time, if I recall correctly, in the year 2011 or 9 most probably, WaterAid together with one of its partner in UDSK, Dusto Swasthya Kendra of Dibalogda. So we together bought a vacuum tank and started this dislodging mechanism. So getting sludge out of septic tank or pit latrine and dumping it in the main sewerage system of Dhaka.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
So that is the start of fecal sludge management. And from that is the kind of beginning of fecal sludge, the concept started. And then Department of Public Health Engineering installed 11 fecal sludge treatment plant in 11 municipalities.
11
municipalities.
So 11
11 towns, fecal sludge management plant. The Department of Public Health Engineering constructed 11 FSTPs in 11 districts or cities. And those 11 were very simplistic in terms of design, which is kind of a storage and dumping site type of thing, and not very technically rich design. But I would say that that was a breakthrough in the system, because they realized that fecal sludge management in urban context is a necessity. And that is the start. And after that, immediate after that, in 2014, WaterAid for the first time constructed a comprehensive fecal sludge management treatment plant containing the entire value chain. That means from collection, transportation, treatment, and disposal up to using it as a compost. So this is for the first time WaterAid actually demonstrated a full sanitation value chain is possible. And actually, BMGF got interested and they actually funded desperately. They funded SNV, they funded practical action, and they come up and IRC also, IRC together with NGO Forum, they also constructed different FSTPs in Bangladesh. So mainly these few INGOs with support from Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and some other funding from Netherlands government and others, they started working on FSTPs, be that for research purpose, be that for implementation purpose. So they bring this concept in under urban sanitation perspective. And those were kind of successfully started operating. And these stakeholders came together and they kind of pursued the government for developing a national framework known as Institutional Regulatory Framework for Fecal Sludge Management, in short, IRF-FSM. IRF-FSM. So this got approved in 2017, and this was held up. It took 2 years to get approval by the ministry because people are yet to understand the necessity of this. But this is nothing, this is not something an exclusive new document. This document was prepared based on all existing documents and trying to figure out which agency's role is what and how they will coordinate and work with each other. For example, as I mentioned earlier, the role of utility agency is managing sewerage system. But on-site sanitation, even in Dhaka city, 80% is managed by on-site sanitation is managed by city corporation, 20% is managed by utility authority. So how these authorities will coordinate and what is the specific role of city corporation and specific role of WASA. So those things are spelled out there, and the issues of tariff and other things, those are explicitly tried to spell out in that Institutional Regulatory Framework. So this is done so far, and now we are developing together with the government rollout plan, national implementation plan of this IRF. So this is the latest status of urban sanitation. So this is in nutshell, and let me add one point that this FSM issue got very hype, and WaterAid, you know that from 2011, WaterAid is every year doing budget advocacy together with all stakeholders, watershed stakeholders, with UNICEF, and all the NGOs and different networks. So every year we analyze the budget and pressurize government that this is the areas where more budget allocation is needed. So we have seen and we have strongly raised the issue that budget allocation for FSTPs are essential. And we have seen that budget allocation has raised over years significantly. And we strongly advocated with the World Bank, with ADB, and we noted that they started giving fund for FSTPs. And they started believing at some point, because they were arrogant at the very beginning, they thought at the beginning that sewerage system is the only solution. And I would say that CSC played a very strong role here, because at some point we invited CSC in Bangladesh and we launched an international FSM training in Bangladesh for the first time, where we developed resource pool in Bangladesh, because nobody had the idea how to design an FSTP plant. So we actually contributed significantly, we means WaterAid contributed significantly to develop human resource who can design and manage this FSTPs and with support from CSC, and we did it by ourselves. We take the help of AIT Bangkok as well. So just to develop national resource pool. And at some point, World Bank, ADB, they realized that even if we design sewerage system in a town, in a city like Bangladesh, which is complex in nature, there must be some pockets where you need to put FSTPs to manage that locally. So their recent designs compiled both FSTPs and sewerage system. And if you look at the pipeline, even Islamic Development Bank also came in. Now, a total of 100 FSTPs are in the process of implementation. So within a year or two, you will find more than 100 FSTPs are in the field.
How many are there?
100.
Okay.
100 are in the pipeline, slightly more than 100. And local government engineering department is implementing few. Department of Public Health Engineering is implementing few, something like that, with funding from World Bank, ADB, Islamic Development Bank, and also with support from BMGF. There are a strong issue still remains regarding the operation maintenance. Mm-hmm. So, there are issues which are more technical, one hand, and another lack of technical human resources in the municipality level, and there are other practical issues. I may not go in that details because this is more about the evolution part. So let me stop here and listen to you, that what is your ask.
Yeah. Thanks, Hasin, for that excellent history. Just tell me, how many municipalities are there in Bangladesh?
It is 328, but it changes almost every month. So you quickly just start. You have to start it and get the actual figure, recent figure.
Yeah, that's what they told me in Pakistan. Also, around elections, it changes. So
yeah,
we even declare rural areas as municipalities. They were saying. Okay. In terms of so what you have said is that mostly the institutional functions are divided between WASAs for the 9 corporations, and then municipalities for have their own municipal authorities are responsible. And now you have so even within corporations, the outside areas are under PHE, DPHE. They manage that system either for on-site sanitation or even water, those areas outside the municipalities. So WASAs operate within the municipality area?
WASAs
area?
Vasas are in the big divisional town, there are Vasa. Big cities, only
Corporations.
big cities there are Vasas, and there are 9 or 11 Vasas, something like that. I need to check the number. So there are say 11 Vasa. I will check and I can give you the exact number, because that is again changed very recently, that how many Vasas are there. So there are a number of Vasas, but other than Vasa, which are kind of in big cities, there are Vasa. But for small cities, secondary and small cities, there are municipal authorities. And you will find A, B, C type of municipal authorities. Some municipalities are big municipalities, municipality A. Some are close to rural areas. Those are municipality grade C, something like that. So municipal authorities are kind of self-sufficient. They are supposed to do the business by themselves. So nothing to do with the DPEG. But when there is big infrastructure like water supply system is there, so if there is big water supply system or big FSTPs, ideally DPHE, Department of Public Health Engineering, is supposed to construct that and hand over to municipality for operation and maintenance. There is another glitch because Poroshobha municipality doesn't own this, because Department of Public Health Engineering is planning it, implementing it, and just handed it over. So they feel it kind of top-down approach, and something is given on top of them. So there is an issue of ownership and operation maintenance. That's a separate issue. But ideally, DPHE being a technical agency, they are supposed to construct it, be that water infrastructure or sanitation infrastructure, and hand it over to the municipality. But if the infrastructure is small in nature, like pit toilet or septic toilets, it is either taken over by the individual as a household owner, that person is responsible, or NGOs or any development partner, or on behalf of the low income community, they can do it by themselves. So
I was asking, for example, Dhaka. Dhaka will have a Vasa and also have a municipal corporation.
yes.
So the municipal corporation areas are delineated as Dhaka expands. Like Delhi also, we have municipal corporations. So the areas which fall outside the municipal corporations, they are under Vasa or they are under PHE?
Okay. Say in Dhaka city, there is a sewage network. I'll clarify here. In a sewage network, the sewage network is managed by Wasa, Dhaka Wasa. Rest of the 80% area is managed by city corporation.
Okay, so you're saying Vasa only manages sewerage.
Sewage. And the rest of the on-site sanitation is managed by city corporation. And there is a kind of, sometimes there is a gray area. Who is doing what? Kind of.
And what about solid waste? Who manages that?
City corporation. It is everywhere city corporation or municipality.
Okay, that the Vasa doesn't manage that.
None doesn't manage.
Okay. So in terms of these approaches then, the citywide inclusive sanitation, shit flow diagram would have been applied because a lot of progress has been made in Bangladesh on FSM. But is there any, like for example, when I was talking to Pakistan's Masoor Ahmad yesterday, or rather to Nepal, Mr. Suman Sharma was saying in Nepal, the tendency is that we have projects, but we don't have programs. So we have projects funded by different bodies. So we'll have one Milamchi project and we'll have Bhaktpur project by different agencies. So in Bangladesh, is there within the urban sanitation system, is there any approach which they are following, or are like the city sanitation plans, were they ever done, or is there any other say sustainable sanitation or resource recycling? Are these concepts put in any form either as an approach or as a tool in Bangladesh?
I think when different projects come, project comes with different tools, and the project, it's all kind of comes as a projectized approach. Project is there, tool is there, tool is applied and done. So, and these tools are never been utilized by the government or by other projects as a decision making tool. Let me clarify one by one. For example, SDA, SFD. SFD is a very nice tool for decision making, but most of the SFDs are always um, prepared and used and developed, used by the professionals, not by the decision makers, not by the municipalities. They even don't understand all the rates and all the things. So it is the professionals who make their diagrams and show it in the meeting of municipalities and trying to make the municipalities understand this is the red part. So you should understand that your city needs this. Kind of, it's a kind of trying to convince them. It's an advocacy tool, which is fine. But the intention with that it was developed, whether it was made or whether it was used as a decision-making tool, as a question, number one. And I have seen in your question, you have mentioned a number of tools. So I mentioned about one of the popular tool in Bangladesh, but I have seen that a number of SDA, SFD was developed and developed by us even. We developed not less than 14 SFDs. But another problem is the level of data required for really developing a second level of SFDs is really investment is required. We can develop a very generic one through FGDs that doesn't give you a right reflection of the city, which is possible and which is easy. But if you really want to invest, but you have the right product generated, you really need money. So that is another issue. Now coming back to the next tool, city sanitation plan. So one of the time we had a craze of city sanitation planning. We learned that it is a very important tool. We have to implement it, and suddenly that was overshadowed by sewage planning, because sewage came with more powerful domination by BMGF, World Bank, and if I'm correct, at the first meeting of that, when the concept was evolved, WaterAid and plan was also there, were also there. So all of them came up with this Swiss idea, which is more inclusive, and gender was there, inclusion was there. So what we are doing? We are bringing new thing, and we are kind of discarding the old thing, and suddenly does it make any difference? And now I will be little critical over here. Then when we are developing the Swiss as a tool, we have developed what the Swiss principle is. And I was part of development, I mean chronological development and fine tuning this process. Earlier there were 7 principles, it came down to 6, and we divided into 2 parts and so on. But all these are not for me, not for professionals like us. It is for the municipalities.
Yeah.
This will vary from municipality to municipality depending on their strength, their capacity, their willingness to, their internalization. But we have developed hundreds of materials around it for the consultants, for the professionals, so they understand it's all, but we don't make it user-friendly for them to understand who will implement this in real sense. So I think that whenever we are building such tools, we are looking at from our perspective, being a professionals, we are never thinking that these tools are for the decision makers who are popular leaders, who are public leaders, public figures. They don't have time. They don't have. So we really need to think those. Unless we do that, this will not be really used as a decision-making tool.
Mhm. Okay. Two questions. One I forgot to ask earlier about CLTS and urban, because CLTS originated in Bangladesh, and I saw it mostly in the rural context with work and the kind of areas, Dinajpur, they had been there, I remember. So one question is related to CLTS, and the other is again the institutional issue that, for example, sewerage systems are big, expensive technology solutions, and therefore many times they are preferred for that reason. And in India also we have, for example, in each state, in especially North India, a technical agency and a municipality, and the technical, it's like your Vasa. So the technical agency is interested in creating more of expensive sewerage structures, and whenever, so it's a challenge to convince them to actually go for something else, and the municipality doesn't have the power to actually construct. And in southern Indian states, the municipalities are more empowered, and therefore there is no dichotomy of a parastate technical agency there trying to, enforce something. But in our northern Indian states, it is, that issue is there. So on both, I would like you to respond. I mean, on the CLTS, was it like given up after the rural one, or was it tried in the urban and then it was limited to just toilets, or was it also limited to FSM or to any other understanding? And on the role of these parastate agencies and their priorities of high cost infrastructure.
I think CLTS was modernized or contextualized in case of urban situation, and even we tried it out. And one of the drawback of implementation of CLTS was when we implemented in rural context, there was kind of homogeneity in the community. So you can ignite the community very easily because they had a sense of ownership to that community. They, they have belongingness, they have kind of understanding of common well-being, something like that. But when you kind of work in an urban environment, people are coming from different districts. They don't have that sort of bondage, number one, and they don't spend much time in this community because they have to go out for work early in the morning and back in the evening. So they don't have time to kind of for giving you time for social mobilization work and talk to neighbor and uh, think of others' well-being. So working in a typical CLTS mode in urban context is really challenging. But it worked in several slums very nicely, where those slums are stable slums. For so many years, those slums are there. These inhabitants are kind of permanent in nature. So in some way, those actually worked very well. But I would say that it was kind of modernized or contextualized CLTS approach. It was not typical rural CLTS, but it was kind of updated, upgraded, or customized CLTS type approach that worked. Number one. The FSM is kind of not possible the way CLTS was designed because on-site FSM is not possible. We can always have to think of off-site of FSM because of the land constraints. So technically that FSM in true sense, I mean, FSM, on-site FSM is not possible, but off-site FSM is possible. But when you talk about collection of money and united, united activities by the community, that is possible and that is there and that is happening actually.
So, but this collection of money for what purpose?
For discharging the sludge FSM, I mean, dislodging the sludge from septic tank for disposal from the community to external places. So that sort of things are there. So they are not managing the sludge within the community. This is not possible, but they are managing to transport the sludge outside for treatment or disposal. So for that they require money, and collectively they are giving this money. So that's not a problem.
Okay. So just this issue of approaches, what you said, I mean, let's leave that infrastructure one. I think we agree that that's always a priority to have centralized infrastructure. Most agencies have that. But just coming back to these approaches, thank you for your very frank feedback on that. I also agree with it that most of these approaches and tools are used by professionals. So is there any other, like, that's why CLTS was considered important. But in, say, citywide planning, whether it is CWIS or this one developed by EVAC, CLUES, 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 or even city sanitation plan, which was actually supposed to emerge from consultation with various stakeholders. Uh, what has uh, uh, what has been the challenge there in developing these, or have they been not even been tried?
Okay, let me clarify that challenge from my own observation, because we have even limited scope because being a wash agency. So when we kind of go for consultation, citywide consultation, I mean, city doesn't mean that city, it can be even worldwide consultation. So demand always comes from, say, having a park, open space, something like that. So demand always comes for drainage
Yeah.
or something like that.
Hmm.
Whenever it comes that goes beyond the wash, then our scope gets limited. We don't work often in urban development. So wash sector actors have one of the limitations, they don't work beyond the boundary.
Yes.
That is a very difficult call for me, at least, that we cannot kind of, if we have to work on city sanitation plan, even in Swiss, I would say that we really need to work on urban development, women empowerment, and all the, if we don't really work in an integrated approach, how can we integrate wash into other sector actors if we don't work with, multi-sectoral approach? So we need to make a compromise between there. So that's my
No,
honest.
that's excellent. I think this needs to be stated, and I will state that upfront also.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. And I mean, because otherwise I've also experienced the same thing, that if you try to narrow it too much, then people either just give you a small suggestion, and their immediate priorities, even in Nepal, they said, were drainage, not sewage, and they would connect their septic tanks through the drainage. So for them, it is important that the streets are, clean, and also solid waste is not visible, because what is underground is anyway not visible. So as long as you can put it underground, and that is done. And space constraint and parks and public places, these are also, I also don't understand why they can't be integrated with a citywide inclusive sanitation. And there can,
And most in, yeah, sorry.
yeah, and also gender issues which you mentioned. Yeah, tell me.
And another point is, to me, we always talk about sustainability. Since I have the experience of working in multi-sector for some time, so I understand the feeling, and I understand that income generating activities is essential. If we can somehow link with income generating activities with some link with interventions, then actually it becomes more sustainable. And in case of wash, we can hardly link that. And if we cannot link that, then sustainability will always remain a question. Even for wash, we can think of income generating activities, but wash people are really skeptical for that. For example, if we think of public toilet, we can immediately link with the income generating activities. Say, public toilet will run by a restaurant. On top of public toilet, there will be a restaurant, and this will be a combo. But when you will talk to this with a wash agency, that wash agency will be scared that we cannot go out of this. This is not our mandate. So public toilet will never work as an independent, I mean, self-sustaining manner. That is quite obvious. So we are stacking ourselves by not opening our mind and by not opening our agenda.
So in terms of future, what kind of challenges do you see for Bangladesh and urban sanitation?
Okay, our challenges in terms of advocacy, that we are kind of in terms of Bangladesh, I think one of our major advocacy is around FSM, FSTPs in our language, that sustainable FSTPs we are expecting, and for that we have struggled to obtain a higher budget, which we did. Now we are struggling for securing operational maintenance fund from government. But to me, that securing operation and maintenance fund will not solve the problem. Because right now what is happening, that the World Bank project, ADB project, or Islamic Bank project, they are keeping O&M fund, knowing that it is challenging, they are keeping 3 years or 2 years O&M fund within the project provision. But to me, this is deferring the problem 3 years down the line, nothing else. To solve the problem, we need to think of creating human resource within the system, within the organogram of the municipality, number one. The second, not only that, municipality should get funding for the technical people to keep the technical people in their organogram and get their payment from the government. So if we cannot work on that, and again, as I said, that when we talk about this again becomes beyond our peripheral boundary. So we don't go for advocating for that. We say, no, then that's not our business. Let us live happy with getting some fund for O&M. So we need to stretch our boundary if we really solve the problem and the root cause. So that I see as the next emerging problem.
See, in Pakistan yesterday, they told me that in some of the towns, they are making private corporations. They are working under the district authority, but they are like companies, and they are being entrusted with this kind of a job. So in Bangladesh, is there any movement like that? Because your WASAs are directly under the government, and I'm sure this O&M problem, which was there for big infrastructure, will also happen for small infrastructure, as you're rightly saying. But is there any movement to convert your WASAs into private entities, or?
WASA is already autonomous.
Okay.
Autonomous, but even though WASA is not able to kind of self-sustain, they need some money, and there are issues. There are several. It's complicated because the water is very highly subsidized, and this is a political issue. This is not a simple issue to resolve. This is not a simple calculation, because the rate we are getting water, it is absolutely cheap, and we are kind of struggling to, and we are advocating with the Dhaka WASA for quite a long time, so that they make a progressive tariff, so that slum dwellers get less, pay less, and the rich people pay more. We are unable to do it. As I said, that this is not this is of political interest. This is not a plain calculation. So there are issues around this, and in case of waste management, some USAP is trying to water and sanitation for urban poor. That organization is trying to privatize these FSM, FSTPs run by private sector. And my experience when working with practical action, I have seen that if you look at the whole value chain, sanitation value chain, for collection up to treatment, this part is always profitable. But the treatment part is always highly expensive. So if you don't think holistically,
can you repeat again if you're saying?
From collection to up to dumping into treatment plant, this part, when the collection part of the sanitation value chain or FSM value chain is always profitable. It can run profit, no problem. Anywhere it will run profitable. But the treatment plant it will always run negative deficit because it is very expensive. If you want to maintain and everything, it will run deficit. So one of the solution could be you will outsource it to one company for the entire value chain. This is number one. The second point, you cannot outsource it for 1 to 3 years because in that case, the break-even point cannot come. You have to outsource it for say 20 years or something like that so that they can really make business out of it. Number three, we always think that the end product will make a huge market. It will never make a market because the end product is small in quantity and the cost or profit is extremely low and the marketing is extremely difficult. So profit from the end product is a useless concept. So that should be put in minus form. You need to think from service perspective because your citizen, when I am in the authority, I am the municipal authority, it is my responsibility to provide the service to the citizens. So from service point of view, I have to think it and I have to keep some money, subsidy or as a service provision for the city dwellers. So there must be some mechanism for subsidizing or encouraging this. And when I will calculate the whole project value, whole value of the city sanitation value chain, I should consider the environmental cost apart from financial value. If I really can build in this environmental cost, that is, I am not polluting the surface water, I am not polluting the environment, then I will make it really a profit-making venture. So that we never consider.
Yes, that's not done. So what happens usually is that any project which comes, they try to do some kind of an assessment, and then that assessment is limited to seeing the viability of that project only. And then therefore it doesn't, environmental assessment doesn't happen. Even as you were saying, assessment of other priorities and needs of the people is not there. Maximum they're thinking of willingness to pay and how much it should be there and all. So I think
people's payment, it will not recover. It will never recover 100%.
So you're right that the service perspective is important rather than trying to just make it into a business contract. And if you have to make it into a business contract, you're saying it should be a long-term 20 years instead of a 3 years kind. And one company should be given a contract.
And you should think of a green business and you should have a think of other incentive for green business. So that should be a different model. So you are giving for 20 years, it's a big green business, it has some environmental value and it should be a different way of, awarding that contract. So you can think from a completely different perspective.
Thanks a lot for this. Any question to me, Hasin? I think you answered more than I asked for. Thank you.
Sorry.
No, I didn't think of these points, but you mentioned them very well. I will keep these in mind and I will share with you the final note which I share with the authors of the compendium. So thank you so much for your time and your patience and your contribution actually, which is excellent. And this way, at least I think At some point, maybe we can even share this video for others who want to listen to the
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'll request only to cross-check all the figures because I'm very poor in recalling figures, like the number of city corporations and number of municipalities.
It's fine. We are only here discussing the larger
Yeah.
picture and not.
That's right. And it was very nice catching up with you after many years.
In fact, whenever we meet, we are not able to have this kind of a conversation.
No,
So I
not
think because of, and this is the best way to do it rather than webinars, which are, 4 people speaking.
Yeah.